The world smelled of ash and iron. Smoke still curled upward from the ruins of a once thriving village, the charred skeletons of homes groaning in the night wind. The soldier moved cautiously, his boots crunching over broken tiles and glass, his hand never far from the hilt of his blade. He had seen too many villages like this, left hollow after raiders passed through. Sometimes there were survivors, most often only the unlucky kind. He thought this place abandoned until a faint sound reached his ears, a whisper almost too thin to hear, like breath caught between sobs. The soldier froze, his heart tightening. Instinct told him to leave. Where there was sound, there could be traps. Yet something in the broken murmur, that trembling plea, kept his feet moving forward. He found her in the shell of what must have been a tavern. The roof had caved in, beams scorched black, and among the rubble she sat, curled into herself like a child. Her dress was torn beyond modesty, her hair matted with soot and dirt. She looked more shadow than woman, her skin pale beneath streaks of grime, her eyes hollow as though every ounce of hope had long since been bled out. When she saw him, she didn't scream or flee. Instead, she lifted her face and whispered hoarsely, "Please, kill me." The words struck him harder than any blade. Soldiers were used to death. He had sent men to their graves and watched comrades fall beside him. But rarely had he seen someone beg for it so openly. She wasn't bargaining. She wasn't hysterical. She was simply resolved. He crouched, near her, careful not to startle her. "Why?" he asked, his voice low but firm. Tears gathered in the corners of her eyes, though she did not let them fall. "Because there's nothing left. Nothing worth saving." Her lips trembled as she added, "If you have mercy, end it quick. Don't let them find me again." The soldier's brows furrowed. Them. Always there was a them. He searched her body for wounds and found blood along her arms, old and new scratches that told of both struggle and neglect. She was too thin, the kind of thin that came not just from hunger, but from surrender. She hadn't been fighting to live. She had been waiting to die. Still, he couldn't bring himself to obey her plea. His life had been a long march of orders, and too many times he had done what was asked of him without question. But this was no command he could follow. "I don't kill the defenseless," he said finally. A bitter laugh cracked from her throat. "Defenseless? That's all I am. I can't fight, can't run. Death is the only kindness left to me." Her eyes locked with his then, desperate yet resigned, as if she were trying to convince him that ending her was the right thing, the only thing. But he saw something else beneath the despair. Fear. Not of him, but of whoever had left her in this state, whoever she was running from. The soldier extended his canteen, but she only shook her head. He insisted, pressing it gently into her hands until at last she drank. Her throat convulsed with the effort, as if even water was too heavy. The water trickled down her throat, though she drank as though it were poison rather than salvation. She coughed after the first swallow, her frail body trembling as though the act of living had become unnatural. The soldier steadied her, one hand on her shoulder, yet she flinched from his touch as if burned. "I told you," she rasped between shallow breaths. "Don't waste your kindness. I am not worth saving." He studied her face, lit dimly by the orange glow of distant embers still smoldering in the ruins. Her eyes would not meet his. They remained fixed on the ground, dark pools brimming with shame. The soldier had seen fear before, terror on the battlefield, grief in widows' cries, despair in children clutching the bodies of their parents. But this woman's gaze held something different. It was the look of someone who believed she had already been erased from the world, a ghost that simply hadn't yet been buried. "Who did this?" he asked. His tone was not gentle. It was edged, demanding. She didn't answer, only shook her head. "Tell me," he pressed. Her lips quivered. "At last," she whispered. "You don't want to know. If you knew, you'd kill me just as quickly." "As they wanted to. I told you I am cursed, marked. They will come again. And when they do, if you are near me, you will die too." The soldier sat back on his heels, silent for a long moment. He had heard such talk before. People broken so deeply they believed themselves doomed. People who carried guilt for things done to them rather than by them. Still, her conviction was unsettling. He thought of leaving her, but the memory of her plea, "Kill me fast," gnawed at him. Abandoning her would be no different from delivering her to death. He shook his head. "I've buried too many already. I'm not adding your grave to the list." Anger flashed across her face then, brief but fierce. "You don't understand," she cried, voice breaking. "If they see me alive, if they find me with you, they'll never stop. Do you hear me? You'll be hunted, and for what? For me, a woman worth less than the dirt beneath your boots." Her words trembled into silence, broken by her sobs. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders racked with a grief too heavy for someone so thin. The soldier let her weep. He was no stranger to sorrow, but he knew it could not be silenced with platitudes. He let the storm pass, watching her, wondering what horrors had carved such deep despair into her soul. When her sobs dulled into ragged breathing, he finally spoke. "You said you're cursed. Show me." Her hands dropped, revealing eyes swollen with tears and streaked with ash. She recoiled at his words, shaking her head violently. "No, you don't want to see. If you saw, you'd understand why I must die." "Then let me judge for myself." "No!" she snapped, clutching her ragged skirt as if to protect some hidden shame. "Please, do not ask me again. I cannot bear it." The soldier's jaw tightened. He had interrogated prisoners, bargained with dying men, and looked his own death in the face more than once. But never had he met such resistance not born of defiance, but of pure self-loathing. Whatever secret she held, it was destroying her. He softened his voice. "I'm not your enemy. If you truly wanted death, you'd have found it already. You want release? But maybe not the kind you think." Her lips parted, but no words came. The truth of his statement seemed to silence her more than his tone. She stared at him, uncertain, her expression torn between distrust and an almost imperceptible flicker of hope. He rose and extended his hand. "Come with me. Until I know the whole truth, I won't let you throw yourself away." For a long moment, she only stared at his outstretched hand. The firelight danced against the rough lines of his face, casting shadows in the hollows beneath his eyes. He looked every bit the hardened soldier, broad shoulders weighed down by armor and weariness, scars crossing his skin like unspoken memories. Yet there was something steady in the way he stood, something that spoke of resolve rather than cruelty. Her lips trembled. She wanted to refuse, to push him away, to cling to her despair because it was the only certainty left to her. Yet her body betrayed her, weak, trembling, on the brink of collapse. Finally, with a broken breath, she let her hand brush his, and he pulled her gently to her feet. She swayed immediately. He caught her before she could fall, her frail weight pressing against his chest. She stiffened at his touch, every muscle tense, as if expecting violence. The soldier eased her onto a broken beam where she could sit upright. He shed his cloak and wrapped it around her shoulders, though she tried to shrug it off. "Keep it," he said simply. "The night grows colder." She pulled the fabric tighter despite herself, avoiding his eyes. Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the crackling of distant fires. At last, the soldier crouched before her again, his gaze sweeping over the length of her arms. Beneath the dirt and ash, he could see them clearly now, scars. Not the scars of battle or accident, but deliberate marks, some long faded, others raw and angry. Thin lines traced across her wrists and forearms, like brands pressed again and again into flesh. His stomach hardened. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low, edged with quiet fury. She flinched at the question, tugging the cloak tighter around herself. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." "You shouldn't care," she whispered. "If you knew the truth, you'd leave me here. Everyone does. Everyone always does." The soldier inhaled slowly, tempering the storm inside him. "I don't leave people to die," he said. "Not if I can help it." Her eyes glistened, the first hint of tears threatening to fall again. She shook her head, stubbornly clinging to her silence. "You don't understand. I am not like others. I am ruined. They made sure of that." His gaze dropped again to her arms, then to the shadows that clung to her body. She shifted uncomfortably, pulling the ragged hem of her skirt lower over her legs as if to hide something. He noticed the gesture, but said nothing yet. Instead, he reached into his pack, pulling out a strip of cloth and a small vial of salve. "Your wounds need tending," he said, matter of fact. Her eyes widened, alarm flashing across her face. "No!" she blurted, clutching her skirt tighter. "Please, do not touch me, not there!" The soldier froze, recognizing the panic in her voice. It was the voice of someone who had been touched before against her will, someone who carried not just scars of the body, but of the soul. Slowly, carefully, he set the salve aside. "All right," he said gently. "I won't. Not until you're ready." She stared at him, disbelief mingling with suspicion. Most men, at least the ones who had crossed her path, had not asked permission. The soldier's restraint unsettled her as much as it soothed her. Minutes passed in heavy silence. Then, perhaps to fill the void, she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "You want to know who I am? Why I want death?" He nodded once. She shook her head bitterly. "If I tell you, you will turn from me, just as the villagers did, just as my family did." The soldier's brow furrowed. "Your family?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked away, trembling, as though words were knives cutting her tongue. At last, she managed. "Once, I had a name worth speaking. Once I belonged to a house where laughter lived. But that is gone. Burned. Buried. What remains of me is only a mark no one can look upon without seeing filth." Her voice cracked on the last word. She folded in on herself, clutching the cloak tighter until her knuckles whitened. The soldier did not push her further, but in his mind, the pieces began to gather, scars that were not accidents. A woman abandoned even by family, a mark she would not name, but that haunted her every breath. He knew one thing with certainty. Someone had tried to erase this woman's humanity, and if he walked away now, he would be complicit in their cruelty. So he sat beside her, silent but unyielding, and thought, "Whatever that mark is, I will see it, and I will not turn away." The night deepened, heavy with silence. Crickets hummed faintly beyond the charred edges of the village, and the sky above them glimmered with stars indifferent to human sorrow. The soldier had not moved from her side, though she had retreated into herself, wrapped tightly in his cloak as if it were both shield and shroud. Hours passed in stillness, until at last her body betrayed her. She swayed, weak from hunger and exhaustion, her breathing shallow and uneven. The soldier saw the way she winced when shifting her legs, the way her hand drifted to her thigh with unconscious protectiveness. "You're hurt," he said, breaking the silence. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with alarm. "No," she answered too quickly, too forcefully. "It's nothing." "You can barely sit upright," he countered. He reached into his pack again, pulling out fresh bandages and the salve. "Let me see." Her reaction was swift. She recoiled, pressing herself against the collapsed beam behind her, clutching her skirt with trembling fists. "No!" she cried. "You can't! You mustn't!" His hand paused mid-air. He studied her chest rising and falling like a trapped bird's, her voice sharp with terror rather than defiance. Slowly, he lowered the bandages, his tone softening. "I'm not here to harm you, but if your wound festers, you'll die." Her lips trembled, and for the first time her resolve cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, sliding down her ash-stained cheeks. "Better to die," she whispered, "than to let you see." That sentence lingered in the air like a ghost. The soldier's jaw tightened. He knew then that what she hid was not merely an injury. It was the secret she had hinted at since the moment they met. "I've seen worse than scars," he told her. She shook her head violently. "Not this. This is no scar. It is a brand, proof of what I am." He leaned closer, his voice low, steady, the voice of a man who had once calmed dying comrades on the battlefield. "Show me, or let me help you hide it better. Either way, I won't turn from you." For a long moment she stared at him, her face torn between disbelief and desperation. Then, with trembling hands, she loosened her grip on the tattered skirt. The fabric fell just enough to reveal her thigh, pale beneath the soot and dirt. There it was. The soldier's eyes narrowed, not in disgust, but in recognition. Burned deep into her flesh was a symbol, seared so long ago it had healed into raised, twisted skin. The brand was cruelly precise, an emblem he had seen before, etched on flags, armor, and iron collars. It was the mark of the Black Faction, the merciless raiders who trafficked in fear, who enslaved villages, who punished women who defied them by stamping their flesh with the sigil of ownership. The soldier's chest tightened. No wonder she begged for death. No wonder she feared every glance, every touch. That brand was more than scar tissue. It was a sentence. Any who saw it would know she was once theirs, property to be used and discarded. And in a world ruled by prejudice and cruelty, most would treat her as tainted forever. She looked away as he stared, shame flooding her features. "Now you know," she whispered hoarsely. "Do it. End it. You'd be merciful to kill me now." But the soldier did not move. His fingers flexed against the bandages he still held. His voice, when it came, was rough with anger, not at her, but at those who had done this. "They wanted to mark you as theirs," he said, "but you don't belong to them. Not anymore." Her head snapped toward him, disbelief plain in her eyes. "You don't understand. That mark follows me wherever I go. I can't erase it. No village will take me in. No man will look at me without seeing filth. My own family cast me out." Her voice cracked into sobs. She wrapped her arms around herself as though to hold in her breaking heart. "Do you see now why I begged you to kill me? Better a clean death than this endless shame." The soldier did not answer at once. Instead, he knelt beside her and dipped the cloth in his water flask. Without asking further, he pressed the cool fabric gently against the raw edges of her wound. She gasped, startled by his touch. Not harsh, not claiming, only careful. "I see you," he said quietly, meeting her tear-filled gaze. "Not the mark. You." The weight of those words struck her harder than she expected. No one, not a villager, not a passerby, not even kin, had looked at her that way since before the brand. She wanted to believe him, but fear still clenched her heart. Still, for the first time, she did not beg for death. The embers of the ruined village burned low, casting the world in dim orange light. The soldier sat back on his heels, the damp cloth in his hands stained with soot and blood. The brand on her thigh glared up at him, a cruel emblem carved into flesh, a symbol that screamed of ownership and suffering. He wanted to look away, but he didn't. He forced himself to see it, not as proof of shame, but as evidence of what had been stolen from her. The woman trembled beneath the cloak, her face hidden behind her hands. She had shown him her deepest secret. And now she waited for the inevitable, for him to recoil, for him to spit the same words others had thrown at her, for him to abandon her to the ashes. Instead, he spoke. His voice was steady, though there was steel beneath it. That mark is theirs, not yours. They branded you to break you, to make you believe you belong to them. But you don't. She lowered her hands just enough to glimpse him. Disbelief painted across her face. You say that as though words can erase it. Her voice cracked. You don't understand. Men hunt women with this mark. Villages drive us out. To them, I am not a person. I am a thing. A cursed thing. The soldier's jaw clenched. He had seen the black faction's cruelty before. Men with eyes like wolves, cutting through the weak for sport, burning towns that refused tribute. But never had he seen their work this close, etched into the very skin of their victims. His hand tightened into a fist until his knuckles whitened. I understand. Enough, he said. Enough to know they will come for you again. Her shoulders slumped as though crushed by invisible weight. Yes, and that is why I asked you to end it. Better to die here than to be dragged back into their chains. The soldier fell silent, his mind a battlefield of conflicting instincts. Every lesson drilled into him as a warrior told him to leave. Her, to cut his losses, to spare himself the inevitable bloodshed that would follow if he stood against the black faction. They were relentless, merciless. Protecting her meant placing himself in their path, and he had already lost too much to war. But then he looked at her again, at the trembling in her hands, the tear tracks on her soot-streaked cheeks, the hollow resignation in her eyes. She wasn't asking for life, but she wasn't truly asking. The soldier and the branded woman left the ruined village before dawn. The fires had dwindled to smoldering heaps, and the acrid smoke clung to their clothes as they walked away from the ashes. She leaned heavily on him at first, her strength nearly gone, but he adjusted his pace without complaint. He had made his choice. Whether wise or foolish, he would not abandon her. They moved through the forested hills, guided by the soldier's instincts. He knew the black faction well enough to predict their movements. If the raiders had razed the village, they would not leave survivors unchecked. They would send scouts back, sniffing for stragglers, tying up loose ends, and she, with the brand seared into her flesh, was more than a straggler. She was a prize. At midday, when the sun filtered weakly through the trees, they stopped beside a stream. The woman sat on a mossy rock, dipping her hands into the cold water. For the first time, some of the ash washed away from her skin, revealing faint traces of the beauty she once carried. High cheekbones, delicate features worn thin by hardship, eyes that might have been bright had sorrow not dulled them. The soldier filled his canteen while keeping watch on the tree line. His instincts twitched at every rustle of leaves. When he returned, he offered her a strip of dried meat. She hesitated before taking it. "Why do you do this?" she asked softly. "You should have left me. Men have been killed for far less than sheltering someone like me." "Because leaving you would have been the same as killing you," he answered. Her gaze lowered to the stream. "Perhaps that's what you should have done." The soldier didn't reply. He had learned that some wounds couldn't be argued away. Nightfall, they had pressed deeper into the woods. The soldier built no fire, fearing the smoke would betray their position. They ate in silence. She curled up beneath his cloak once more, shivering, while he sat awake with his sword across his knees, eyes scanning the shadows. It was then he heard it, the snap of a branch, faint but deliberate. His body tensed. He rose without a sound, motioning for her to stay low. Her eyes widened, panic rising, but she obeyed. The soldier crept forward, moving like a wolf among the trees. Another sound followed, the scuff of a boot against earth. His heart hardened. They were not alone. Through the gloom, he caught sight of two figures, their silhouettes faint against the moonlight. Both carried blades, and both moved with the practiced quiet of hunters. On their shoulders gleamed faint flashes of iron, armor, etched with the same sigil he had seen branded on the woman's thigh, the Black Faction. The soldier's hand tightened on his sword. Two scouts, maybe more nearby. He retreated silently back to the woman, who sat stiff with fear. "They're here," he murmured. "Scouts," her breath hitched. "I told you, they always come." "Then we'll move." She shook her head, frantically. "No, you don't understand. They won't stop. Even if we escape tonight, they will hunt us across every road and valley. They will find us." Her eyes glistened, terror choking her words. "It would be better for you if you—" "Leave me here." The soldier crouched to her level, his face grim but resolute. "I already made my choice. They'll have to cut me down before they lay a hand on you again." Her lips parted, stunned by the conviction in his tone. No one had ever said such words to her. Not after the mark. Not after her family cast her away. For a heartbeat, she saw in him something she thought she had lost forever. A reason to believe. They pressed onward through the forest, shadows stretching long beneath the moon. The soldier's ears remained sharp, every rustle of leaves sending his hand instinctively toward his sword. The branded woman walked beside him, though her steps faltered often. Exhaustion weighed her down, but something else troubled her more, an inner storm raging just as fierce as the threat behind them. By the time dawn broke, the forest opened into a clearing where a ruined chapel stood, half swallowed by ivy. Its stone walls sagged, the roof caved in, yet it offered shelter from the wind. The soldier guided her inside, settling her against a wall where shafts of morning light spilled across the floor. She clutched the cloak tightly around herself, her eyes restless, searching the corners as if the past might be waiting there. When he brought her water, she whispered, "You don't know what I am, what I was." The soldier knelt beside her, calm, steady. "Then tell me." Her lips pressed together. For so long she had carried the burden in silence, convinced no one would hear her truth without recoiling. But the memory of his words, the way he looked at her mark and said, "I see you, not the brand," lingered in her mind. Against her instinct to remain silent, the truth pressed its way out, broken and halting. "Once," she began, her voice thin, "I was not this. I had a name worth speaking. I was the daughter of a house that was proud, respected. My father kept horses, and my mother sang in the evenings. Our halls were filled with light." Her hands trembled in her lap as she spoke, and the soldier listened without interruption. "But power is a fragile thing," she continued, bitterness tightening her voice. "A man came, one of rank, one who believed everything belonged to him. He wanted me." She spat the word as if it were poison. "When I refused, when my father refused, the man called upon the Black Faction. They came at night, with fire and steel. Our guards were cut down. Our home burned." Tears glistened in her eyes, though she fought to keep her voice steady. "They dragged me from the flames. My family, my brothers, my sisters, they scattered or were slain. And before the eyes of those who survived, they branded me." Her hand unconsciously pressed against her thigh where the mark lay hidden. "They made me an example, a warning. No man could claim me after that. No home would welcome me, even my kin. When I returned to them, they turned away. My father would not look." At the ruined chapel was silent after her confession, save for the faint chirping of morning birds outside and the rasp of her unsteady breath. She sat hunched in the corner, her cloak pulled tight, her eyes fixed on the floor as though ashamed of the words she had just spoken aloud. The brand, hidden now beneath layers of cloth, seemed to burn again in her memory, its cruel outline seared not only into her flesh, but into every moment of her life since that night. The soldier remained still, his back straight, his hands resting, loosely on his knees. He had listened without interrupting, his face unreadable but his eyes heavy with thought. He had heard many stories of cruelty before. Soldiers told them in whispers around campfires. Refugees poured them out in broken fragments as they fled. But hearing it from her, spoken in such raw, trembling honesty, made it strike deeper. "You've carried this alone for too long," he said finally, his voice low, deliberate. She shook her head. "There was no one to carry it with me. Those who knew turned their faces away, and those who did not, when they saw the brand, treated me as filth. It is better not to speak, better not to hope." Her words sank like stones into the air between them. The soldier studied her. This woman, who believed herself ruined beyond repair, who believed death was kinder than breath. He understood despair. He had lived with it too. Quietly, he pulled his gauntlets from his hands. He extended his left arm, scarred from wrist to elbow. The skin bore the jagged remnants of a burn, the kind that twisted flesh and lingered long. After the wound had healed, her eyes lifted to it, startled. "This," he said, his tone flat, "is from the siege of Gethar. A firebomb struck the barracks. I pulled 3 men out before the roof collapsed on me. The flames marked me as their own. For months, I couldn't look at it without remembering the screaming, without thinking of how I failed to save the others." He let the sleeve fall back into place, but his gaze stayed on her. "I carry other scars, too. Scars no one can see. Faces I couldn't protect. Orders I shouldn't have obeyed. They follow me, just as that mark follows you." Her lips parted, the faintest flicker of confusion in her eyes. "But you are not shunned." "Because men do not look at my scars and see shame," he replied bitterly. "They call them proof of honor, proof of survival. But the truth is, scars are only what others decide to see." He leaned closer, his voice softening, steady but fierce. "You are not ruined. You are not cursed. That brand is not your identity. It is their cruelty carved into your skin. You survived it. That survival makes you more than they ever meant you to be." The soldier's words lingered in the ruined chapel, their weight pressing against the silence. For the first time in years, the branded woman felt the faintest spark of something she thought long extinguished: hope. But hope was fragile, and the world was merciless. By evening, the forest no longer felt safe. The soldier's instincts told him they had been tracked. Birds had gone silent, and the air carried a taut stillness that only hunters or predators could create. He urged her to move quickly, keeping her close, his eyes scanning every shadow. They didn't have to wait long. The ambush came as the sun dipped low. 5 men emerged from the trees, their armor etched with the dreaded insignia of the Black Faction. 2 carried blades, 1 a bow, and the other 2 held chains that clinked as they advanced. Their smiles were cruel, eyes gleaming with the certainty of possession. "There she is," one sneered, his gaze fixed on the woman. "The runaway, branded and broken, yet still worth something to the right buyers." Her body froze, terror flooding her limbs. The soldier stepped in front of her, sword drawn, his stance wide and ready. "She is not yours," he said, his voice like iron. The raiders laughed. "Not ours. Look at her leg. The mark says otherwise. Step aside, soldier. You've no idea who you're crossing." "I know enough," he growled. "And if you want her, you'll have to cut me down." The bowstring twanged. The soldier moved instantly, dragging her behind a tree as an arrow thudded into the bark where she had stood. Then chaos erupted. Two raiders rushed forward with blades, their strikes quick and brutal. The soldier parried, steel clashing in sharp sparks. His strength met theirs in a violent rhythm, each blow ringing through the forest. The woman crouched low, trembling, her heart pounding so loud she feared it would draw arrows to her chest. One of the chain-bearers advanced toward her, grin widening as he swung the iron links. "No use hiding, little rabbit," he jeered. "We'll drag you back kicking or not." She scrambled backward, hands shaking. For so long she had been prey, running, hiding, waiting for death. But the soldier's voice echoed in her memory. "You survived it. That survival makes you more." Something inside her shifted. Fear still gripped her, but alongside it came a flicker of defiance. She seized a fallen branch, jagged at the end, and as the raider reached for her, she thrust it upward with all her strength. The wood splintered against his chest, staggering him just long enough for the soldier to turn and drive his blade through the man's side. Blood sprayed across the leaves. The woman gasped, staring at what she had done, not just defended herself, but changed the tide of the fight. The others roared with rage. The archer loosed another arrow, grazing the soldier's arm, but he fought on with relentless fury. He had battled hardened men before, but this time there was more than survival at stake. There was her. Together they fought, she striking with desperate courage, he shielding her with steel. One by one, the raiders fell, their arrogance broken beneath the will of a man and a woman who refused to yield. At last, silence returned. The final raider collapsed with a choking gurgle, his blade clattering uselessly against the stones. Soldier stood over the carnage, chest heaving, blood, some his, mostly theirs, streaking his armor. The woman stood trembling nearby, the broken branch still clutched in her hands. Her body shook, her breath ragged, but her eyes burned with something new, not just fear, not just shame. Part 10. A New Dawn. The forest was quiet again, but the silence no longer felt like a trap. It felt like release. Bodies lay scattered. Among the roots and rocks, their threat ended. Smoke from the soldier's bloodied blade curled faintly in the cooling night air. He stood still for a long moment, his chest heaving, his arm bleeding freely where the archer's arrow had grazed him. The branded woman remained rooted where she was, clutching the splintered branch that had once been her only weapon. Her knuckles were white around it, her breath ragged, but her eyes no longer carried the emptiness of a hunted soul. She had struck back. She had not let herself be taken. That truth thundered louder in her chest than the fear still rattling her bones. Finally, her grip loosened. The branch dropped with a hollow thud against the stones. She staggered toward the soldier, her steps uneven, her face pale but her expression fierce. "You're wounded," she said, her voice trembling but steady enough to carry. "It's nothing," he muttered, though the blood running down his arm betrayed him. Without hesitation, she tore a strip from her cloak and bound his arm tightly. Her hands shook, but she pressed firmly, her eyes focused. For so long, she had believed she had nothing to give, no worth, no strength, no future. Yet in this moment, she realized she could care, she could protect, she could stand beside him when she tied the cloth. He caught her wrist gently. Their eyes met, hers shimmering with exhaustion and something unspoken, his steady, filled with quiet pride. "You fought," he said softly. "Not just me. You. You stood." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not only of grief. She swallowed hard. "For years, I wished only to die. I thought there was nothing left of me worth keeping alive. But tonight..." Her voice faltered. She looked down at her hands, still stained with blood. "Tonight I saw that I can still fight, that perhaps I am more than what they branded me. The soldier's hand rose, not to the mark on her thigh, but to her face. He brushed a lock of hair from her cheek with surprising gentleness for a man of war. You are far more. The brand lies. The brand says you are theirs, but it is not truth. Truth is written here. His hand moved slightly, hovering near her chest where her heart pounded. And here. His gaze locked on hers, unwavering. The forest breeze swept around them, carrying the first hints of dawn. Through the broken walls of the chapel ruin, pale light began to creep. Birds stirred, timid but sure, their song tentative as if testing whether the world was safe again. For the first time in years, the branded woman listened and believed it might be. They sat together until the sun rose fully, its rays warming their chilled skin. In the growing light, the weight of the night's battle slowly lifted. The soldier tended his blade, silent but calm, while she simply watched the horizon, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her spirit strangely lighter. At last, she turned to him. What now? If we keep running, others will come. They will never stop. He slid his sword back into its sheath and looked at her with the same steady resolve he had shown since the night they met. Then we stop running. We find a place where they cannot reach you, where you can start again. Her throat tightened. A place where I am not the brand. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. A place where you are simply who you are and who you choose to be. She drew a shuddering breath, then nodded. It was not certainty, it was courage. A fragile, flickering courage, but enough to take the first step. As they rose and prepared to leave the ruin, dawn bathed the forest in gold. The path ahead was unknown, fraught with danger and shadows of the past. But for the first time, she did not dread it. She walked beside him, her head held higher than before, her mark hidden but no longer her identity. The branded woman was no longer only a survivor. She was becoming something more. And as the soldier walked at her side, his steady presence a shield and a promise, she began to believe that perhaps her life was not ending, but only just beginning.